Dan O'Brien from the AWS Startup team. We're lucky to have 30 minutes for a no-holds-barred session with Alex Burke, CEO of Education Perfect. A passionate storyteller, Alex has a 20-year track record in driving technical excellence and team building across multiple industries. This includes airline, banking, government, telco, education, and retail. He was previously the CEO of TigerSpike, a high-growth technology services business that he sold in 2017. And since May 2019, has been the CEO of another high-growth tech business. I think I see a theme here. Dunedin, New Zealand-based Education Perfect, a technology company that is focused on improving learning outcomes in the modern-day classroom. Education Perfect is used by over 1 million students across Australia, New Zealand, and Asia. And of course, the world has gone through huge change in the previous year, with lockdowns, working from home, and learning from home. It is just this change we will explore in today's session. We will touch upon 5 topics today: positive agility to respond to change, building a data-driven mindset, customer feedback is like gold, focus on culture to underpin growth, and scaling without borders. Thanks, Alex, for joining us. Let's rock into it. Starting with our first topic, positive agility to respond to change. You know, 2020 was a very unique year for all of us. Education was clearly an industry that had major disruption. How did it impact Education Perfect?
Yeah, so our COVID journey actually started at the end of January, so Chinese New Year, and we heard that Chinese schools were being disrupted and closed down. So we reached out to 50 Chinese international schools and offered our product for free. And then as the months sort of unfolded to February and March, it ended up being global. And so over that time, we had a base of over 1 million students, but we actually added an additional 500,000 students at that time.
There's been talk of businesses adopting both defensive and proactive strategies during this turbulent time. What was important for Education Perfect?
Yeah, for EP it was a proactive strategy. So what we saw was through market feedback that there was a need. Teachers needed some support. And so by offering the product for free, we felt, one, we could kind of help them understand our value proposition, and also raise our profile market as well. So it was really an opportunity for us to demonstrate our value without kind of asking for money up front.
Students, teachers and schools had to move fast to keep schooling going in 2020. What was the range of responses that you observed across countries? Were there marked examples of resilience?
Yeah, it was really mixed. So there were some schools that had technology, and for that reason, when they moved to distant learning, that there was minimal disruption. But there were other schools and there were teachers that hadn't used technology at all. So the concept of a Zoom call or even an email was actually quite foreign to them. So there was a real change management piece for them to get used to interacting with their students from a distant learning environment.
Excellent. Let's move into our second topic, building a data-driven mindset. There has been talk of the education industry going through a transformation. What changes have you seen?
Yeah, there's been quite a few changes. I think probably one of the biggest changes, if you think about schools, you've got teachers, you've got students, you've got school leaders, but the new user in the group is parents. So over the last 12 months, parents have never been more engaged in education. Whether they liked it or not, you know, they got put through homeschooling, so they got a real sort of exposure to the education system.
How does a business respond to these changes, Alex?
Well, what we saw, so for us, we've adapted ourselves in a couple of ways. One is we're starting to understand how parents can use our technology, so the concept around an EP for Home product, and helping parents engage not just in distant learning, but just at home. So that's one area. The other area that we saw was equitable access. So one of the biggest differences we saw between schools were there were some schools and children at home that didn't even have a broadband connection or devices at home. And so there was a real disparity there.
Fascinating. And how does that work, Alex?
Yeah, so what we've done, so we've adjusted our pricing model, and what we've decided to do is create subsidy levels. So in Australia, it's a thing called ICSIA level, and we recently won a Victorian government contract where we offered schools under 960. It's about 1,100 is the norm. Yes. We offered them subsidised pricing. We've done exactly the same in New Zealand, so it's called decile in New Zealand. It's 1 to 10, and we've offered subsidy pricing to 1 to 3. But working with yourselves, AWS and Code Avengers, we're also offering specific STEM workshops for a number of schools in New Zealand, schools that are underprivileged, to kind of help them understand technology and give them more skills around digital.
Great, that's a fantastic initiative. I'd love to hear about that. Now to our third of 5 topics. Customer feedback is gold. With that lift in interest in Education Perfect, how did your product cope? And what were your learnings?
Yeah, so firstly, if you can imagine an extra 500,000 users on our platform, we had to really support ourselves from an availability standpoint and a technology standpoint. Also from a customer support team, so we added an extra 30 people during the first initial 6 weeks to handle all the extra support inquiries that we had. But what that meant was everything that we had was kind of accelerated and expanded. So for example, there may be a part of the onboarding process where we would normally get, say, 10 requests, but in this time we had over 10,000 requests, and it really helped us identify pain points in our processes.
Amazing to get that insight. How did you leverage these new insights?
Well, for me, actually, the negative was we twisted it around to be a positive, because ultimately then what it helped us do was identify and prioritise the areas where we need to improve our product. Right. So we focused our time on our onboarding process. So we made a few tweaks to simplifying the onboarding experience in terms of screens. We added some additional video tutorials to just kind of handhold and guide teachers through the process. So essentially it helped us improve our product.
Superb. This really resonates. 90% of what we build at Amazon Web Services is driven by what customers tell us matters. Can you give us an example of a user insight that led to a change in the product? How do you encourage students and teachers to share their experiences with you?
Yeah, so we get a lot of feedback. So we get direct feedback from customers, so teachers within a classroom environment. We have a first line support which receives calls, emails, we get notes on social media, we just get feedback within and around the classroom, and so we take that feedback and we work through then prioritisation of what seems to be the best focus for us from a product development standpoint.
In fact, my son is a user of Education Perfect, and one thing that strikes me is out of the dozens of products out there on the market, Education Perfect has a very high bar in terms of the customer experience. How did Education Perfect manage to achieve this excellence and user experience, and how do you bake this into your product development?
Yeah, so when we first started, so we started over 12 years ago, and we just had an obsession over the user from day one. When we first launched the product in New Zealand, it actually wasn't a very good product, but we obsessed over spending time with teachers and trying to understand where their pain points were, and we improved the product off the back of that. And that obsession still stays with us now, and it's making sure that we're trying to create the very, very best experience for our customers.
And as a result, what is your Net Promoter Score, a measure of customer satisfaction? I understand 35 is the technology company industry average. Very keen to understand what Education Perfect has as a Net Promoter Score.
Yeah, we got a Net Promoter Score of 67 for Australia and New Zealand.
Finally, when thinking about customers, I have heard this incredible statistic of a customer response time on average of 7 minutes at Education Perfect. Can you please tell us a little bit more about how you achieve this incredible response for your customers?
Yeah, it's something actually we've developed over the years, because if you think when a teacher's in a classroom and they're trying to do something with a student, they need something fixed really quickly because they've only got like a 30-minute class or a 60-minute class. So we've just created processes that allow us to very, very quickly jump onto a question. So that's from our first line support, but also our broader team.
2 more topics to go. First of which is focus on culture to underpin growth. It's been quite a year. What growth have you seen as a business, and what are the key drivers behind the growth?
Yeah, so as a company, we're growing around 40-50%, and our international team is growing around 350% growth. So we've had a lot of fast growth. What was important for us was putting down on paper a clear set of values and a clear mission. So values like one team, continuous improvement. We have one called End Today, Excited Tomorrow, which is about resilience. And these values then are linked to people's job descriptions, to their objectives, and it's a great way to tie people back to the business. So as we've hired people in overseas markets, they can see a clear connection back to our Kiwi heritage.
That's great. So a people focus has helped you drive growth.
Absolutely, because if you have clear values, you have a clear mission. What that allows people to do, it almost creates a bit of a safe environment for people to work. And from that, you then can kind of push the boundaries, you can challenge each other, and you can push for much bigger goals.
I've heard you refer to in the past about balancing strategy versus execution and having an execution mindset. You've mentioned the term quiet achievers. Can you please elaborate on what an execution mindset means and how this has helped Education Perfect steer these heady times? How do you foster a team of quiet achievers?
Yeah, so companies will always have a big vision, but if it's big, it's very, very hard to get moving and get momentum. Now, if you break it up into small little pieces, so little steps that you can build some momentum, it's much easier then to grow a company. And so I absolutely believe that you need people that are able to also, start with that big picture, but bring it down into small little chunks and execute on those.
How do you inculcate team morale and culture to new hires and maintain the same for your team when it is hard to spend time together?
Yeah, it goes back to the values. It goes back to the mission. When people are onboarded, if you have those clearly written down, they can clearly understand and connect with those. And probably the most important thing for any company is swag, is having actually a good t-shirt. One of the goals I've had in both businesses is find a t-shirt that people will be comfortable to wear at the weekends. Because if you've got that, then they're more than happy to bring it into the team every day when they're working. And there's no better connection than having good swag, having a good t-shirt where if someone's in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, if you're all wearing the same t-shirt, it kind of connects you more back to the business.
Finally, moving on to our last topic, scaling without borders. The ongoing pandemic has meant restricted flights. How has this impacted your global growth journey?
Yeah, well, for me, for the past 12 months, I haven't really done any travel at all. And that was pre-COVID. I was spending most of my time on international and domestic flights. So it's made a big difference for me in terms of family time. Big difference as well for me is that I would, say, have a meeting in the US to Chicago, and it will take me 4 days. I'd fly there and have a couple of days, and I'll have back-to-back meetings. Now, over the last 12 months, I've actually had more meetings in the US and Europe than I've ever done, 50, 60, 70 meetings. And it's much easier now to do like quick 90-minute sort of Zoom calls, build a bit of a relationship and have some next steps. For me, now, then that means there's a real opportunity because it's a real level playing ground. So we're from New Zealand and we've got a meeting in New York and we're competing against a UK company. The UK company can't fly there as well. So it's a totally different, it's a level playing field now, and that provides opportunities.
What about working from home? Is that a positive or a negative?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I think if you've had some more experience and you've had previous connections, it's been much easier for people to function. Depending on also the age that you've been homeschooling as well can cause you different issues in terms of how you're running your day. But I think if you're young and you're just starting your career, you really need that office connection. You need that kind of interaction, you need that connection. And I think where we'll go with businesses is probably a balance of both. So a bit of home working, but also a bit of time in central offices or meeting up as a team.
Similar question with schools that are far away. How do you earn customer trust with school leaders and teachers in, say, China or one of the other over 50 countries around the world that you're working with without being able to meet in person?
Yeah, so for me then it links again back to our culture. So our mission is humanising technology for lifelong learners. There's a real human element because ultimately technology in education is difficult and it's hard, and you need that human element because there's a bit of change management to help people handhold people using technology within classroom. So we've extended that human element to what we're doing. So with webinars, video tutorials, the way that we communicate to schools, to just try and humanize the process and kind of build trust that way.
Thank you for your time today, Alex. It has been fascinating to learn about Education Perfect's experience in quite a particular era since the start of COVID. I want to first acknowledge how very difficult the past year and a half has been for many families, students, and educators around the world. If there are any silver linings, the positive impact technology can play in maintaining education is one of them. Some final thoughts. I thought that Education Perfect, reaching out to international schools in China to help them manage the disruption through a free offer, a terrific example of a positive and active posture to change. We also touched upon how the importance of data is in driving the right decisions, and it seems to have been absolutely key. It is only with the data that you can be hyper-responsive to customer needs. Equity of access as well was really key in the discussion. And there is one form of data which is pure gold: customer feedback. Education Perfect treated customer feedback like gold, always listening to the customer, continually improving the product. Great to learn too that the team culture and values are what enabled Education Perfect to onboard more than 80 people with a focus on the customer. I especially like the value of ending today excited by tomorrow, and the importance of good t-shirts and swag should never be underestimated. Finally, it is heartening to hear that in today's environment, Australian and New Zealand and other countries' entrepreneurs have a level playing field when taking on the world in this most critical of sectors. In essence, our future. Finally, a call out to always be learning and growing in your capability as an entrepreneur and to grow your team's skills. There are a bunch of resources online from AWS training and certification, and I encourage you to make good use of those. On that note, thank you again, Alex, for your time and insightful comments today. And finally, if you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to fill in customer feedback.